Finance Minister spoke of was, look, if you need technology, go out there, ink joint ventures, bring global companies to India. That's the government's message to industry. Are we finally going to see a pickup as far as private investment is concerned? It's been coming in slivers across some sectors, but what's the sense that you get in 2024?
The sense is that the private sector will pick up its investments. The finance minister is absolutely right. In fact, in my introductory remarks, I had mentioned that private industry is going slow in terms of its capex. And the government spend over the last 3 years in capex has actually helped the industry. And I would give a lot of credit to what the government has done, because if you look at the last 3 budgets, capex spend has been far higher than what it has been in decades.
Historic numbers as far as capex is concerned.
These are historic numbers, and capex has a much greater multiplier. It's much easier to have political sops given which have a much smaller multiplier effect. So the budgets over the last 3 to 4 years have been for the long term. And as I've called it, it's economics over politics. And that's a great place for the economy to be. Private sector has been a little slower, and there are reasons for it.
Yeah.
The reasons are, we've seen a lot of uncertainty around the world. Right? We talk about the VUCA world at some point in time. That world looks like a very nice, tame, calm world compared to where we are today. Right? And suddenly we see all these things happening, and private sector will look at it and say, is it the right time for me to invest given all the challenges we are seeing? And that's why it has been a little slower. At the same time, there have been some segments where there has been a lot of investment. Right? In the auto business at Mahindra, we've doubled our capacity in the last 2 years. Right? And it wasn't an easy decision to say we're going to double capacity in the face of the world slowing down, inflation, potential recessions, etc. And there are a number of other sectors where they have put in more capacity. But what we are seeing today is capacity utilization is starting to hit 75, 80, 85% in certain sectors. And that is where we're going to start seeing more investment coming in. We are seeing India stand very strong in the world. At one point in time, if the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. Today we've seen the world sort of sneezing and catching a cold, and India's been standing fine and doing very well. So as we see that across, we're starting to see a lot more commitment from the private sector for investment in multiple sectors. And that is only going to grow as the India story strengthens in the next few years.
You know, FICCI does a manufacturing survey as well as a pulse check of your members, Anish. What's the sense that you get, not just from the larger members, but also from the MSME space at this point in time, in terms of both demand visibility as well as the need to add capacity?
It's again been mixed. Sectors that supply to certain segments of society have been doing very well. We have seen a K-shaped recovery. In certain segments, it has been slower. What we are also seeing is that with companies looking at India as a destination, MSMEs have benefited from that because those are the ones who set up the ecosystems. So it's been a mixed bag so far, but the challenge for us is to drive inclusive growth. As we do that, we shall see a much greater growth across different segments, and that's going to place India on a much stronger footing.
Let me link this back to your group specifically, because you dabble across different segments and different sectors. We were just talking about the opportunities, for instance, in the aerospace and the defense sectors that you're also involved with. Of course, the auto sector, and we've seen what's happening as far as the auto space is concerned, farm and tractor equipment as well. Just across the length and breadth of the spaces that you operate in, what gives you the most confidence today? What are the plans that you see yourself focusing on over the next few years?
So, Shireen, we operate, as you know, in 20 industries, and we mapped our industries against where we see India's growth in the next decade. And we play in about 70% of India's growth. And every single sector is seeing huge opportunity. Let me leave aside auto and farm, which obviously have tremendous opportunity. If you look at real estate, it's booming today.
Yeah.
You're seeing that across different markets. And our real estate business is really very aggressive and moving out and growing at a very rapid pace. Hospitality. Right? We have 100 resorts in India, and we're looking at, can we triple this? And how soon can we triple it? Right? If we could do it in 3 years, we would, but my business head would just tell me I'm crazy. So they already feel that. But we have to grow at a much faster pace on that front, and there is a demand for that because family vacations are something that a number of folks in India enjoy, and we're seeing India as a destination. There are lots of places in India that are worth going to, and that mindset is changing as well. Logistics is still very early in its growth phase, and for India to grow as a manufacturing base, logistics is going to have to play a much bigger role as we go forward.
Yeah. Solar
is one that already is growing rapidly. We'd set a 5x target for our solar business, and we're now looking at it and saying, should it be 7x or 10x? In fact, we just had a discussion in the last few days saying, should we really take those targets up higher because we are growing at a much faster pace than we had expected? And I could go on. So across our industries...
So are you moving up the targets as far as the solar business is concerned?
Yes, we are going to move it up from 5x. We have decided that we had planned 5x in the next 5 years. We've now agreed that that will be done in 3.5 years. So now we're seeing, okay, what happens after that? So yes, we are moving those targets up. But across all of these businesses, which we call our growth gems, we have a 5x target right now. And we've given each of them a period of 5 to 7 years for that 5x target. And many of them are very well on track to be able to achieve it. And as we just spoke, in some cases exceeded as well.
You know, one of the opportunities that you are focused on, and I think that's an opportunity that many in India are also looking at this point in time, is the electric vehicle opportunity. But I want to ask you about what you make of what's happening globally. Whether you talk to Ford, you talk to GM, they're all scaling back their EV plans at this point in time. In fact, just today, Apple reportedly suggesting that they are going to hold back their EV plans and focus their energy on generative AI, which has, of course, taken the world by storm at this point in time. So does that put a question mark on the kind of expected EV growth that you were anticipating as well? Because India, of course, still very, very low penetration, but there's also that Damocles sword of when the subsidies are going to go and if they will continue. So how do you look at the EV space today?
So let me just take a step back from the current situation as well as the next couple of years. If you just look at technologies, EV is a far better technology than ICE. Emissions are non-existent. You've got a much greater fuel efficiency, though it's effectively close to zero cost in the sense of operating costs that you would have for an EV. Servicing an EV is much easier. The car is a lot more fun to drive. And for those who have driven an electric vehicle, especially the born electrics, I wouldn't call the adapted electrics in that sense, they're just a tremendous amount of fun to drive. So you've got all of that going. So what needs to happen? First is cost needs to be at parity with ICE.
Yeah.
Because folks don't want to pay that much more. Second is charging has to be available everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? That is what we are seeing as a challenge today. And even in the US, there are a number of issues around charging not being available, some cases components not there, people have to stand in line longer, and that's very frustrating. So as a car owner, I can see someone saying, why am I waiting half an hour for charging when I could get petrol or diesel filled in 5 minutes? So those are things that will change in the ecosystem. And that's part of the change that's required. We did look a little skeptically at pronouncements that were made a few years ago saying we will be 100% EV by 2030 or by 2035. It's not easy to make that change, but at the same time, once you hit a certain inflection point, it can move very quickly. If you look at Norway today, Norway is 95% EV.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at the change from a horse carriage to an automobile, I'm sure they went through exactly the same set of challenges. And within a period of 20 years, it went completely from 100% horse carriage to 100% automobile.
So no rethink as far as your EV targets as well as your EV investments are concerned?
There is no rethink, but at the same time, we're not giving up on ICE investments. Because ICE is not going away in the next 10 years. Because all of these challenges have to be addressed, and there will be a segment of people who will love EV because they have a second car or because they've got charging at home and in office. But we need the ecosystem to come up where everyone can charge as quickly as they can. If we can get charging done in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, that's when you're going to have an inflection point for EV.
You know, you talked about the EV ecosystem, Anish, and I want you to verify for us because there are reports suggesting that you're also looking at the entire EV ecosystem, which means battery manufacturing and so on and so forth as well. There are many others. JSW has announced a large plan of 40,000 crores to build out the EV ecosystem, including batteries, in the state of Odisha. Are you going that route as well? Are you looking at that opportunity?
So we have been contemplating whether to go down battery manufacturing or not for some time, right? And it is not off the table. There are reasons why it makes sense for us to do it. And if those reasons pan out, then yes, we will get into it. So we haven't decided as yet that we are getting into it, but it's something that we have been seriously considering.
But what's holding you back? If it's been on the table, what's holding you back?
I think it's a pure economic decision in that sense. The next question is often around, are you getting into charging stations?
Yeah.
Right? And my answer to that is, well, we did do petrol pumps, so why should we do charging stations? So it comes back to what should an auto manufacturer really focus on? And if it is essential and core for the business, then we will do it. If it is not essential and there are enough good people doing it out there, then we will focus on our core.
Do you believe, I mean, obviously, charging infrastructure is essential to the core business of EV manufacturers. But do you believe that there are enough people doing that, or do you believe that you may be forced to do it yourself?
We believe today that there are enough people doing that because we have a number of partners who are very keen. Some have already gotten in the space, some want to get in that space. And therefore, given the strengths that they have, we are happy to rely on their strengths because we feel that they will do it very well. If we feel that someone's not going to do it well or it's going to hinder what we need, then we will have to get into it. But on charging, I can safely say we don't need to get into it. On battery, we are still evaluating, can we get all our needs met well? If the answer to that is yes, we will not get into battery. If the answer to that is no, it may be useful for us to get into it, at least for the medium term, then we will look at getting into it.
Look at that, and it's still a consideration. The window has not been shut on that decision just yet. But let's talk about the competitive landscape as well. And this is a policy that the government is still sort of going back and forth on whether the likes of Tesla, etc., should be allowed to import into India at lower tariffs, or will they need to first set up domestic manufacturing in India? I know the Indian industry's view is that there should be a level playing field. So what is your position on this to the government when Tesla argues that before we actually set up domestic manufacturing, let us import into India at a lower tariff to see what demand looks like?
So we love competition. Let me start with that. Right? We are where we are today because of competition. If you look at the cars we made 20 years ago or even 5 years ago and the cars we make now, there's just a sea change. And today, we stand in a position where the last 3 models we had were super successes, continue to be super successes. The Thar had 50,000 bookings in 3 days. The XUV 700 had 50,000 bookings in 3 hours. The Scorpio N had 1 lakh bookings in 30 minutes. Right? And this is in a segment where 3,000 bookings a month is success. And that is what we had planned for initially. We've seen a few global manufacturers exit the country. We've competed with all the global manufacturers in India, and this is with R&D in India, manufacturing products that today our consumers tell us are best in class in the country. So we love competition. And it's a far cry. We're not looking for any protection at all. But from an economy standpoint, from an industry standpoint, it's important that we manufacture in the country. In ICE, we have not had the ability to export significantly and be a global player. In EV, that potential exists today. We are making 6 SUVs on a Born Electric platform, which will be among the best in the world. And that's something that we will use to compete outside India. There are other manufacturers in India who are actually doing very well also, and I'm very glad they're doing very well, because that's going to make India much stronger. So therefore, if you look at examples around the world, South Africa and Australia allowed a lot of imports to come in. There is no manufacturing of automobile in Australia today. South Africa has been stagnant for the last 23 years. If you look at China and Thailand, they insisted that manufacturing must be in the country. And manufacturing in China and Thailand in automobiles is thriving. Right? And they gave a lot of subsidies to everyone coming in, as well as to the players who are there. And that's what the government in India is doing as well. There are a good set of subsidies that are there. But from an economy standpoint, it's very important to manufacture in India. And more so in the auto industry, because as a consumer, it's not fair for a consumer to buy from a company that's dabbling and saying, I will see if this market is good or not, and then I will come in, because you're committing to a car that you're buying for 10 years and you want the company to be there for that time period. It's very easy to send cars in from the outside and say, okay, I'm stopping now, I don't need to send anything more. So if the consumer is making a commitment, why shouldn't automakers make a commitment? Well, so that is the approach we have, and therefore our approach is we welcome competition, and India's in a very strong position in the world today, and India should demand that we manufacture in India for the rest of the world.
Well, we still have to wait to see the government's decision as far as this policy is concerned. As I said, it's been going back and forth for a long time. But you talked about subsidies. And I want to understand from you what the industry is factoring in now as far as a possible continuation of subsidies is concerned. The interim budget was silent as far as the FAME scheme is concerned. What's the expectation? Because March 31st is here, almost.
So FAME applied to a certain set of vehicles only. For us, it applies to our three-wheelers. Our four-wheelers are not eligible from a FAME standpoint. PLI and GST are the two primary subsidies. We feel that the government has done everything from a PLI and a GST standpoint that they need to do for four-wheelers today. And it is up to manufacturers now to be able to make cars at a reasonable price and be able to create the market for it. Our sense is that the subsidies will continue up to a point where it is required. And beyond that, they shouldn't continue. I mean, the incentive is being provided to help transition the industry from ICE to EV. Without the incentive, the industry will not transition. And therefore, the right balance will have to be there in terms of what is the right time to take those subsidies out. And I'm sure the government will look at that well, with obviously input from all the automakers, in terms of what is the right time and what is the right balance.
So what is the right time and what is the right balance? What is your view on that?
See, for us, I would look at prices of cells coming down. Today why does a subsidy exist? Because it's more expensive to manufacture an equivalent car in EV than in ICE. If it wasn't, then you don't need a subsidy.
Yeah.
And the subsidy also exists because there's a view that that cost is going to reduce over time. If it's always going to be there, you need a subsidy forever, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it's essentially looking at when will it reduce, when can you get parity in terms of manufacturing costs. This is all data that's easily available. And when you get closer to parity, at that point, or when you start reducing that cost, subsidies
then wind down the subsidies.
Wind it down in that sense.
Outside of auto, because and electric vehicles, something that we touched upon, the defense opportunity, the aerospace opportunity. What is the kind of addressable market that you see, both domestic as well as export? What's the focus? What's going to be prioritized on that front?
I think both are huge opportunities. For us, we've had an aerospace business. We had bought a plant from Boeing many years ago, and it's an industry which takes a long time to establish yourselves. We've established ourselves very well as a tier 1 supplier to both Boeing and Airbus. We've recently just inked an MOU with Embraer to manufacture light medium transport aircraft in India. And we'll see how that goes. It has a lot more steps that we need to take on that front. But we see a tremendous opportunity in the aerospace front. In defense, we are focused in a very specific segment, which is around security solutions, which is around transport, etc. We don't play in the what I call offense-related aspects of defense, because munitions, etc., areas we do not want to get into. But again, here we see tremendous potential in armored vehicles that we've been supplying to the government for some time now. And Atmanirbharta is essential in defense, and that's where we will see the industry grow.
Atmanirbharta is essential, and that is what the government is focused on as well. In fact, the last few lists that the government has announced as far as procurement is concerned is all indigenous and to be produced here in India. What about the export opportunity though, and what about further collaboration, more joint ventures across some of these spaces with global players? Is that something that you're actively considering, actively scouting?
I think we will see further collaboration, because Indian players don't have the technology to make aircraft, right? And or some of these other areas that we need. If you look at vehicles, we have the technology. We can do that very well. But that's the reason why we partnered with Embraer on the aircraft. And there are many other areas where we will look at technology partners or other industry players will. That will start manufacturing in India in a much bigger way. And beyond that, exports will depend on a whole host of factors. I think that is essentially more geopolitic driven than product driven. As India takes a bigger role on the world stage, it will open up more doors in terms of exports to friendly nations with us.
Okay. Friend shoring, etc., is something that we've also spoken about. But, Anish, since we are talking about the next wave of reforms, and Ashwini Vaishnav, the IT and Telecom Minister, speaking at a forum that I was moderating, said that in the third term of the Modi government, he didn't say if, he said in the third term of the Modi government, the focus will be on manufacturing. If that is to be the case, what is it that you would like to see the government prioritize?
So the focus will have to be on manufacturing, because if we look at Viksit Bharat, and that's what we had the FICCI conference on yesterday as well, manufacturing has to go from 18% to 25% of the economy if we have to reach our $30 trillion target. For that, manufacturing has to grow 16 times in the next 23 years. And that's a very significant growth rate.
Yeah.
So what does the government need to do? First is the manufacturing-linked incentives that have been put in place. There, my sense is the government's done everything it needs to. Second is improve ease of business. Right? There again, there has been a tremendous amount of work that's been done. Challenges often come in when you've got the center and the states. Some of the recent budget announcements hopefully make it easier to align with the states, because there may be a one window clearance at center, but there may be multiple windows in a given state. And therefore that needs to be bridged. The third is logistics and the overall end-to-end cost of manufacturing, because we've got to be competitive with the world. And for us to be able to get to a much higher level of manufacturing, it's not just manufacture for India, it's manufacture for the world. And therefore, how can we take each element of cost and reduce it, the cost of power, the cost of logistics. So those are things that need to be improved as we go forward. Again, a lot of activity and work is in place. So we feel very good about the direction and the momentum that we have today. And it's just a matter of staying on that path and delivering on it.
You talked about logistics and you talked about the cost of doing business, etc. And those have, of course, been areas of perpetual angst as well as perpetual focus. The hope is that we'll see breakthroughs on each of these fronts. But something that has captured imagination is what will AI do to different sectors? How much will it disrupt? How efficient will it make sectors? What will be advantage India in an AI era? How are you looking at this within the Mahindra Group? Not just Tech Mahindra, but how are you looking at moving into an AI era across the Mahindra Group?
I think AI is going to reshape the world, but I would expand that to say that it's not just AI, the various aspects of technology. Metaverse has very significant applications. Quantum computing has very significant applications. So it's a combination of all of these together. India is much better placed today because we've got strength in IT. We started with BPO, we graduated significantly over the years, and that strength has often been used for global clients by all our IT firms, Tech Mahindra included. Right? And we are now looking at we have been working very closely with Tech Mahindra across all our businesses to say how can each of our business be a tech leader in its space. We set up a factory of the future where we've got various global clients of Tech Mahindra coming in to look at our factory in Chakan, our auto factory, and say we want to replicate this in the US. And this is something I never thought I would see, to say that you've got a factory of the future in India that's being replicated in the US. But that's what's happening now. So these are strengths that our IT businesses can take to industrial businesses in India and be able to help them leapfrog and then really create a competitive advantage.
You know, when you talk about building factories of the future and you talk about more and more adoption of digitization and automation and so on and so forth, and that has been a journey that many Indian companies have been on, including the Mahindra Group. What do you believe that that could mean potentially as far as job creation is concerned? Because one of the reasons why the government wants to focus on the manufacturing sector is the potential that it has as far as employment creation is concerned. But as we move into more digitization, more automation, are we likely to see a greater decoupling between scale and job creation?
Actually, that's been the case for the last few decades. As various aspects of technology have come in, there are numerous jobs that have disappeared and many more new ones that have come in. And that is part of life today. It's probably moving at a faster pace than we've seen before. And therefore, in our minds, the question is not how many jobs are going to go away. The question more is how many new jobs will be created and how fast can we reskill everyone to be able to get there. And therefore, skilling becomes a lot more important in the context of where we are today.
You know, when you talk about skilling for jobs of the future, is there anything specific that you are doing within the Mahindra Group to try and reskill people, to try and upskill people so that they can, in fact, deliver on the opportunities of the future? And secondly, you know, we're here talking about smart manufacturing, but what about, you know, parity as far as the manufacturing sector is concerned, gender parity? How much of that is going to be prioritized by you?
So let me take gender parity first. That is one of my most important topics, not at Mahindra only, but even at FICCI. That's one of the 4 key areas of focus for us this year, which is women-led development. And that is absolutely essential. But it's beyond numbers. It's not about how many women are in the workforce or what percentage of women do you have. It's about mindsets. It's about equality and equity. So we need to change all of that. The good part is there is a lot more discussion on that. There is acceptance that it needs to be done. And at Mahindra, we've taken a goal to skill 1 million women every year and get them into jobs. We will get there. Right? We've got the Gates Foundation with us. There are a number of other companies who are coming in, partnering with us on that. We're working with the government in a few areas to do that. Right? With FICCI now, we are saying, can we take that platform and make it 10 million women a year and get an ecosystem that's developed with it. So this is going to be a very important area of focus, but it has to address both aspects, which is one, skilling to be able to create jobs, but secondly and more important is the mindsets and an inclusive culture. And how do we get not just companies, but how do we get a society to start thinking about those mindsets and help create an inclusive culture?
Well, you know, speaking about change in culture and change in behavior, one, of course, is the aspect of creating more parity within organizations, but also sustainability. And that will have to be something that CEOs, that leaders champion and focus on. I want to understand from you where you believe the Mahindra Group is at this point in time on being able to achieve the sustainable development goals, the targets that you've set for yourself in terms of circularity, sustainability. You know, on the scrapping front, because the government put out a scrapping policy, Mahindra was one of the first companies to actually execute on that front. What's the ambition?
So on the scrapping front, we have 41 centers across the country today. Right? We put in capacity that is 10x what is being utilized right now. And we're ready to put in more. So we are there. On sustainability...
So the capacity is not being used fully at this point in time?
We are at 10% capacity utilization. Right? And we've expanded from 23 to 41 centers in the last year. And it's one that we feel is important, and therefore we want to make sure that we are there ahead of demand coming in. So yes, it's capacity that's not being used right now.
So do you know, because again, there has been confusion as far as the scrapping policy is concerned, and I guess it's also a question of changing customer behavior and consumer behavior, because people don't want to necessarily give up on things even if they've outlived their utility or their time period. Do you see that change at this point in time?
We do see that changing because, one, the government's a lot more focused on it from an emission standpoint. If you look at cars that are much older, the emissions are far, far greater. After BS6 has come in, a diesel engine is actually a very clean engine. But I can't say the same for diesel engines prior to that. And therefore, it is something that should be taken seriously. An older car will also create greater emissions. So if we are serious about sustainability, this is one area that we've got to look at in much greater detail.
So, if I were to ask you to outline for us the priorities, you talked about the growth gems that have been identified, and these are businesses that you see growing 5 times over the next few years. But, within the group, what are you likely to prioritize, given where you see demand, given where you see opportunities, both from a domestic point of view as well as exports?
So our focus right now is exponential growth. And that's something we are looking at across our auto and farm businesses. For Mahindra, Mahindra Finance, it's really outperforming in their industries. And for our growth gems, it's 5x growth right now. That's the clear plan that we have laid out. We're looking at being bold in everything we do, and that's something you've seen in our stance with EVs, in our stance with solar and many other industries that we are in. And beyond that, execute. That's the key thing. Right? For us, that is the most important part. We can make all the plans we want, but execution has to be very strong.
Absolutely. Execution is the key, and that's what it boils down to. But in terms of unlocking value, are we looking at any of these businesses heading to the capital markets anytime soon?
We will. Out of our 10 growth gems, 3 are public already. And others, as they grow to a certain scale, that's something we will look at taking to capital markets. 2 of our EV businesses at some point in future will get there as well, both 4-wheelers and 3-wheelers. So the answer to that is yes. And as we create businesses of that size and scale, that's something we will take to capital markets.
So you talked about the execution risk as well as the execution challenge, and that's where the magic really happens, especially on the back end. As you look at the landscape today, what's the biggest challenge, what's the biggest hurdle that you believe your execution strategy could risk at this point in time?
I think what we've seen is the biggest challenge is what we don't know. Most things we know we have in reasonable control, but the world today keeps throwing up things you don't know on a very regular basis. And it's about how agile can our teams be to adapt to it. We've seen the semiconductor challenge. For automobile, it was really, I used to play this game called Whack-A-Mole growing up, where something popped up and you knocked it down and something else popped up. It was literally that on a daily basis. Someone saying, I can't send you semiconductors for your keys, I can't send you semiconductors for some other part. So we say, okay, manufacture this car, put it in the parking lot, we'll get to this part later and put it in. But that has taught us a lot of agility. And today, as we see those challenges come up, we look at how do you address it quickly and move forward without it creating a dent. The Red Sea challenge is a significant one, but we just moved forward and found solutions to it. Some of it were things that we had in place as contingency plans, and some of it we had to improvise as we went along. So to me, the challenge is for teams to be agile and to be able to respond quickly to anything that happens around us.
So what do you do? I'm going to end by asking you, what do you do to ensure that the teams remain agile within such a large conglomerate across so many different sectors? Not just agile, but also that they don't operate in silos. What is the culture that you're working to create, and how do you create that?
So first is our RISE philosophy has been the one that binds us together, because our focus is on driving positive change in lives of our communities to enable them to rise. And that's been one that helps us look beyond ourselves. It starts with others and then comes to us. And then there are 3 behaviors that we insist of all our associates, which is being agile, bold, and collaborative. Collaborative will ensure that silos don't exist. Right? Bold will ensure that we are thinking big and we can actually execute. And agile is something that we've just put in place to make sure that decisions are quick, we can move fast. We take complexity out, keep things very simple, because the more complex you make them, you just can't be agile. So these are some of the things that we put in place to help us go forward.
What has been the biggest learning for you as CEO?
The biggest learning is it's all about people. Right? And that's where I spend the vast majority of my time on, is ensuring that we can equip our leaders and all our associates with what they need to succeed, to create the culture that they love coming to work every day with, diversity in not just gender, but all forms, whether it's international, whether it's LGBTQI. So these are all the aspects that we think are important.
What is the dream that you have for India's manufacturing sector?
The dream that I have is India becomes the manufacturing sector for the world.
By when?
I would say by between 2030 and 35.
Okay.
If I were to be optimistic and unrealistic, which I often am, then I'd say 2030. But I think more realistically, it may be closer to 2035.
India, the manufacturing magnet for the world by 2035. Anish Shah, thank you so much as always for joining us here at the CNBC-TV18 zetwerk Smart Manufacturing Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.